Hey everybody, welcome to another IAEI News Live. My name is Thomas Dimitrovich, and today, you know what it is? It's Tuesday. And yes, this is a recorded session, traveling again. So, today I want to talk about maintenance. NFPA 70B is a standard these days, and let's understand the standard through applying the standard. And today we're going to apply it to grounding and bonding. And you know what? It all starts now. All right, welcome back. So, maintenance. Maintenance is an important part of electrical safety. And if you recall, I've said this before, you have three key documents that you need to think about when it comes to electrical safety. One is the National Electrical Code, which we all know and love because we get taught about the NEC and installation requirements a lot. Why? Because we're going to have more than likely than not, we're going to have our installations reviewed, our designs reviewed, and we have to make sure it complies with the National Electrical Code because it's adopted in many jurisdictions. But two, also because it increases safety, we want to make sure we have a platform for safety. So the NEC is an important part of our every day if you're in the electrical industry. It's not your design guide. So for those of you in design, we should not be using the code as a design guide, but it's sort of one of those go-tos. After you've laid out and you've met your customer wants and needs, you make sure that you didn't violate the NEC. The other document, so you have the baseline of making sure we have products installed and applications installed correctly. That's a fundamental. The next thing that you have to think about is the electrical worker who's going to work on that equipment. And we follow a document that's called NFPA 70E, which is your electrically safe work practice. So the NEC is an installation requirement. 70E tells us how to work on things safely. And 70E will tell us that you have to have things installed correctly. And we know what we use for that is the National Electrical Code, NFPA 70. But 70E will also tell us that we have to have that application or that installation. It must be in a state of have been properly maintained. Why is that important? Well, for a lot of different reasons. Same reason why we should look at our brakes on our vehicles every now and then. We don't want to be driving down the road, press on the brake, expect to stop the vehicle, and it doesn't because why? We did not maintain the vehicle. So we expect components in our power distribution system to respond in a certain way, and they're going to respond that way if we maintain that system correctly. They won't respond that way for the entirety of the life if they are never maintained. So, this discussion that we're going to have today is going to be around the maintenance. And grounding and bonding plays an important role in electrical safety in power distribution systems. So, if you think back, I believe we did panel boards, maintenance of panel boards once before. And when you think about a product like a panel board or a circuit breaker or anything that's a physical piece of equipment that serves a function that's very visible, right? Circuit breakers, for example. I mean, they are overcurrent protective devices. They have to be able to open the circuit, close in on the circuit. They need to stop the flow of current should it be an overload condition or a short circuit condition. We can physically test a circuit breaker, and you could probably visualize it in your mind. But a topic like grounding and bonding is a little different, at least in my opinion. And I thought, I wonder what it would be like if we took a journey and said, let's look at grounding and bonding and proper maintenance of grounding and bonding as it relates to NFPA 70B to help us understand how NFPA 70B is laid out. So that's sort of our function today. Now, what I do want to do is, hopefully when I type on this, it doesn't shake everything. My camera is so little word of wisdom that if you are going to be videotaping, it's nice to have the camera separate from the table for a lot of different reasons. So, and my NFPA link subscription has expired. I'm going to lose access soon, so I've got to call customer service. We're going to make that happen here. All right, let's take a look. NFPA 70B, if you did not know it, it is a released document. It was a consensus document. So here in my NFPA link is NFPA 70B. Here is the document. You'll notice chapters 1 through 38 chapters, and annexes A through K. So NFPA 70B is readily available. It is out there on the interweb. So go out to NFPA link or go out to nfpa.org. Get your copy of NFPA link, your subscription to NFPA link, and you'll have access to all of these documents and even older versions. So what I like about having access to older versions is you can do the comparison. You can see some changes. It's good to know. Sometimes it's good to know, hey, this section changed, but it's really great to know what was the language before and what is it now. And then you can understand the change that occurred, whether or not it was just rewording or moving things into an organization to make it for usability, or if it was actually a good technical change that will change how you implement the standard. Also, you can have access to the information of the whole process, so you can see what the public inputs were and what the panel statement was and what the original submitter substantiation was. So all of that goes to history, goes to understanding the changes in these documents as they go through their life cycle. So remember, all of that is free to the for those who sign up on NFPA's website, which is a free subscription just to get access to that information. They want to know who's accessing it. So to get access to the process, to understand the changes, and even submit public inputs and be a part of the process, all of that is free on the NFPA website. NFPA link is not free though. So in any case, let's talk grounding and bonding maintenance. As I said, grounding and bonding plays an important role. We want to make sure that when we ground the system and we bond all of the equipment together, that the integrity of that system is in place over the life of the installation. And many things happen in the process of a power distribution system's life cycle. So we want to make sure that throughout that life cycle, our grounding and bonding system is functional, because when you need it, You need it, and it better be in place. So, grounding and bonding. Now, first, let's talk about maintenance. The term maintenance is used 215 times in the NEC. That's 45 times in NFPA 70E and 159 times in NFPA 99, and I could go on. Maintenance plays an important role in the longevity of a power distribution system in many applications. Now, when you look through NFPA 70B, remember, I mean, I know it might be a little difficult to, but because we're all familiar, I know we're all familiar with the National Electrical Code. And we're familiar with articles and chapters, or chapters and articles, parts, sections, first and second and third level subdivisions. We're familiar with chapters 1 through 4 apply generally, and etc. That's all a part of the NEC style manual, etc. But 70B does not follow the NEC style manual. It follows the regulations governing the development of standards and the manual of style for NFPA technical committee documents. So all documents are going to follow the regulations governing the development of NFPA standards. That's a general rule. But the way this document is laid out is based upon the manual of style for NFPA technical committee documents. So 70E and the National Electrical Code both follow the NEC style manual. 70B, as in Bob, follows the manual of style for NFPA. Now, I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but when you open the document, if it looks different, if you want to understand why it's laid out or what each of these sections, etc., how it all is put together, this is the document you're going to want to review. So don't forget, take a look at this document. It's the manual of style for NFPA technical committee documents. And it's on the 2004 edition. You can get that from the NFPA's website. All right, so chapter 1 is administration. This tells us that I guess you'd call it almost like the scope of the document, right? Preventative maintenance of electrical, electronic, and communication systems and equipment. So it tells you what it covers. It is the practical safeguards of persons, property, and processes from the risk associated with a failure, breakdown, or malfunction. And it has a means to establish a condition of maintenance for the electrical equipment and systems for safety and reliability. So NFPA 70B. So let's talk about 70B and 70E. Think about 70E. What does 70E tell us? We have to have a safety plan. And 70E is the recipe for the safety plan. So 70E tells us that you use the contents of 70E to build your individual safety plan, which it may be and probably will be different than my safety plan, which is going to be different from Joe Schmuckatelli's safety plan from down the street, because each of our businesses are different. If you do residential dwelling units, you're probably not going to have in your safety plan how to deal with 13 terminations of 13.8 kV equipment, because you're not going to find a 13.8 kV panel board or a switchboard or switchgear in a residential dwelling unit. At least I hope not. I don't know. I guess there are probably people out there that have homes like that. But if you don't work in that type of an environment, then you wouldn't clutter the minds of your employees with how to work on 13A kV equipment if you do not do that work. So you pick and choose out of 70E what is applicable to your business, and you assemble a safety plan that you implement with your employees. And if you are an employee, you follow a safety plan that your company has educated you on, and you implement that in the field. 70B is very similar. If in 70B tells us that I'm going to create a maintenance plan for my facility, and 70B has the ingredients on what to do for all those different components. For example, if in your facility you have no busway, you wouldn't include a maintenance program around busway. You don't want to maintain equipment that doesn't exist in your facility. So you look at 70B and you build your maintenance plan. And then you execute that maintenance plan, and you make sure everybody's educated on what that maintenance plan is. So, Chapter 1 tells us the purpose of the document that you are reading. This is an important piece. So, this is telling us that the intent is not to replace manufacturer's instructions. So if we're talking grounding and bonding, if I'm dealing with a panel board, a switchboard, switchgear, transformers, whatever it is, if the manufacturer's instructions tell you how to maintain the grounding and bonding in that equipment, I follow that. If there's no instructions, obviously this is going to give you some guidance. It tells us that we're dealing with industrial plants, institutional commercial buildings, large multifamily residential complexes. You're not covering appliances, equipment used for primarily use in the residential dwelling unit. You're not dealing with a single family home here either. Can I look at this and come up with a maintenance plan for a residential dwelling unit? You might. You might, Rabbit, you might, but that's not the function and goal of this. The goal of this is as stated, industrial, institution, commercial, large multifamily residential complexes. But honestly, if you look through the list of all the different chapters, if you're looking at the maintenance of a receptacle, receptacles are found in many locations. If you're looking at the maintenance of a panel board, load center is a panel board. It's a residential panel board. We call it, quote unquote, the load center. That's a marketing term only. It's not a technical term. It's not how it's listed. It's listed to the panel board standard, so it is a panel board. So could I apply 70B in those applications? I could definitely learn a lot from 70B, but 70B is not intended for those applications. Should you have a maintenance plan for a residential dwelling unit? Absolutely. Absolutely. Whether it's single family or multifamily, I believe so, in my opinion. Does not duplicate or supersede manufacturer's instructions. Again, this is your general requirement. So wait, Chapter 1 was administration. Chapter 4, general requirements, does not duplicate or supersede manufacturer's instructions. 4.2, electrical maintenance program. This tells you that you have to have an electrical maintenance program. You have general requirements, you have inspection requirements, condition of maintenance. You have to determine condition of maintenance, especially if you're looking at an existing facility. You're going to have to determine what is the current state. So if you've never implemented maintenance on grounding and bonding, you've got to figure out, what is my current state of grounding and bonding, right? If you have a facility that was built in the 50s and you've never performed maintenance and you're gung-ho now. You know, you've been following 70E. I love this. So you go to a facility and they say, yes, we enforce 70E. We've built a safety plan and we based it on 70E. And you walk through the facility and you see equipment that obviously has not been maintained. Are you following 70E? I think not, because 70E tells us it has to be properly maintained. So Chapter 4 tells us you need to understand the condition of maintenance of your facility. And if you're just now moving in, which is perfectly fine, everything comes in stages and phases. You may say, look, I've got an excellent, impeccable safety plan. If you don't have a maintenance plan, now's the time to get the book out and start working on it. One of the first steps is going to be to determine the condition of maintenance of your existing facility. Those are sometimes hard facts and hard realities, right? So you can, that's everything. I mean, if you're going to go on a diet, you say, look, I haven't been watching my weight and I am going to start that. I'm not healthy. I don't know my level of health. What do? You go to a doctor, you get your physical, you get the numbers, and you have a state of the union. That's your base plate. Then you know, what do I need to do from here? Same thing with your power distribution system. Get a state of union of your existing maintenance, the existing condition of maintenance of all of your equipment, and then build your plan. You have your principles and controls for electrical maintenance program, your investigations. So if you have an incident in your facility, you need to perform an investigation. If you incident, I forgot the NT. Sorry about that. I'm looking at it like, what the heck? Anyway, for example, you have a short circuit in your facility. From a grounding and bonding perspective, when you have a ground fault in your power distribution system, you put stress throughout that path of current flowing in the system. So wherever that ground fault was, you may, in your investigation, want to understand why, all that good stuff. But the performance of your grounding and bonding system, is the integrity still there? Right? So you've got to think about the stress you just placed on the power distribution system. And if you look at a one-line diagram, you probably can determine the path of the fault current in the power system, or the path that received the brunt of those magnetic forces. And that equipment, all of those junction boxes, the panel boards, switchboards, switches, terminal blocks, all of that good stuff probably needs to be looked at. And then you have your audit, your electrical maintenance program audit. So Chapter 4 helps us understand the electrical maintenance program. Again, you're building you're a cook in a kitchen. You're going to make a dish. You need a recipe. And you need the ingredients. 70B is the ingredients for your safety plan. You build the recipe based upon your facility. Okay, so what's the goal? The goal is practical safeguards of persons and property. Remember, it's not just people, it's property as well. So if you think about sometimes people say, well, I don't have to maintain that, because no one's going to get hurt if it fails. What's our goal? Persons and property. So even if you have some part of your power distribution system that you'll say no one will ever be in front of it, and it could explode, and no one would ever get hurt, you're still going to look at what is the impact on the process. It could cause downtime. It could cost the company money. So you have to do not only the safety evaluation, the impact to humans, but also what's the impact to the process. And you might have something that is very low critical, for for hurting people, but you might have something that's very high that could put you out of business, right? An event on this equipment could cause a disruption in your process, and it could put you out of business or severely cripple your business. So there's life and there is business aspects to maintenance. You want to establish a condition of maintenance of electrical equipment and systems to address any safety and reliability. And that reliability part, again, could just be a business argument and not a safety argument. All right, 70B tells us it's maintenance of the electrical systems and equipment, electronic systems and equipment, and communications systems and equipment. So it's pretty broad. Does not cover dwelling units. And the reason I say, or does it, I mean, we had multifamily up above, but in reality, people, in my opinion, a receptacle in my basement here or in my living room is no different than a receptacle in the office in a commercial building. It's a receptacle. I plug my computer and my iPad and this computer, that light, everything is plugged into a receptacle or a multi-power outlet strip. So those products are also found in commercial. So can you develop, if you are a residential electrical contractor and you're going out to your homeowners, do you think that maybe you could put together a maintenance plan for a residential dwelling unit? And you could go to that homeowner and say, here is what I can implement for you like I have an HVAC. I have HVAC equipment. I have an HVAC company that performs maintenance on my system 2 times a year, one in the spring, one in the fall. They schedule it. They call me. They say, hey, I paid for the plan. They come out. They do their maintenance. And they've shared with me what they plan to do on the system. And in fact, at one point they expanded out and they said, we should probably be looking more than just this HVAC unit. They should be looking at the envelope, okay, and other aspects of a residential dwelling unit that pertain to the performance of heating and cooling this dwelling unit. So, can you use the information? Absolutely. Again, it doesn't supersede or duplicate manufacturer's instructions. Find your manufacturer's instructions. Make sure you have an understanding. And if you're not sure what they are, reach out to the manufacturer of the products in your facility. If you're looking at a drill press, if you're looking at machinery or distribution equipment, and you may have multiple manufacturers, get with those manufacturers. Are they still in business? If they are, what is the recommended maintenance schedules and practices for the equipment that you purchased from them that are in your facility? And it could be that they don't have any. It's a fair answer. It's absolutely a fair answer. If you call manufacturer XYZ for a drill press and you say, look, what's the maintenance plan? What are you telling me I need to do? They may say, just keep it oiled. I don't know. They may say, keep it clean. They may not give you a detailed maintenance plan for that piece of equipment. That's perfectly fine. 70B is your fallback position. Okay, here's the layout. So you have 10 chapters that are general in nature. So again, our mindset here is grounding and bonding. Okay, it's grounding and bonding. You have the administrative, which we talked about. You have your reference publications. We skipped over 2 and 3. We went straight to 4. 2 is your reference publications. 3 is your definitions. Then you get into general requirements, personnel safety. In my opinion, chapter 5. It's just my opinion. Remember, anything that I say is my opinion. It may differ from your opinion. It's not the opinion of NFPA. It's not the opinion of IAEI. It's not the opinion of my company. It's not the opinion of NEMA. It's not the opinion of anybody. It's my opinion. And if you don't have an opinion, hey, you can adopt mine. But in my opinion, personnel safety is 70E. Chapter 5 and Chapter 5 and any other document should simply point to 70E for personnel safety, whether you're conducting maintenance, if you are doing installation practices, I don't care what it is. I don't care what any other of those documents, when they start getting in the world of personnel safety, they should be looking at 70E. And in my opinion, when you go to 70E, if there's, and I know there's a chapter in there that deals with maintenance, in my opinion, they should simply point to 70B. Any document out there that talks about maintenance, it's okay to say it shall be maintained. Boom, 70B. Okay, you can have a document, you can have NFPA 99, the National Electrical Code, all these other codes and standards out there that can say, look, you need to pull maintenance. And if there's anything special for that piece of equipment, if it's not covered in 70B, then give me those special criteria. But point to 70B. And then you have your single line diagrams, very important. All of your studies, very important. Your single line diagram is going to help you do what? From a grounding and bonding perspective, if you have a fault in your system and you want to make sure the integrity of the grounding and bonding of the system is still intact, you don't have to test every point in your power distribution system. You can isolate just the equipment that you want to focus on if you have a good one-line diagram. I can't stress that enough. Fundamental tests in Chapter 7, field testing and test methods in 8, maintenance intervals in 9, and then you get into the, actually 10 is when you start in the system. So I would say 1 through 9, 10's in there as well, but again, chapters 1 through 9 or 1 through 10 apply generally. Then after 10, you get into all of the different equipment. So 11 is your power distribution. We're going to focus on chapter 20, grounding and bonding for this class. You have the entire list. This is, if you have busway, chapter 14 in your facility, then you would be following the rules in chapter 14. But if you don't have busway, you don't need to include busway in your maintenance plan. Don't just throw everything in there for completeness to say, well, in the future I may have busway, because you want to focus your energy in your maintenance plan. You don't want to clutter the minds of the individuals in your plan. You want to keep them focused. So don't give them, if you don't have a photovoltaic system in your facility, don't put photovoltaic systems in your maintenance plan. That's my opinion. All right, so we're going to focus on chapter 20. Again, 1 through 10 are general. They impact you across the board. Chapter 11 through 38 focus on the specific equipment, except for chapters 31, 32, 33, and 34. 31, 32. 31 is wind power electric systems, battery energy storage systems, EV power transfer systems, and then public pools. Those are systems. And honestly, I almost would throw grounding and bonding in the systems. I don't know about you. What's your opinion? Put it in the chat. Chat it up. This is your opportunity. So this says that chapters 11 through 38 focus on specific equipment and applications. But 31 through 34 focus on systems. Do you look at grounding and bonding as a system? Or do you look at it as specific equipment and applications? Oh, ground fault protection systems. So there's a ground fault protection. That's a system. Lighting control system. I don't know. And I'm not sure if that language. All right. So anyway. All right. So one thing to be mindful of when we look through the document, Enhanced tests are not optional tests. We'll get to those as we get through this. 9.3, 9.31 through 3.3 is your condition assessment. So you're going to have to take a look at the grounding bonding system in your facility. And you're going to want to look at the physical condition. You're going to look at the criticality of the equipment and the operating environment of the equipment that you're grounding and bonding, and do the assessment, establish the condition. Sort of a priority. Then you have your online tests, your offline tests, or your online, offline standard and enhanced. We'll talk about those moving forward. So chapter 20, grounding and bonding. This is the way chapter 20 is laid out. You have a scope, you have the frequency of maintenance, and then you have your periodic maintenance procedures. It's a relatively short but very important chapter of NFPA 70B. Now, in the periodic maintenance, you'll notice that you have, or we have, these two here are reserved, this one is reserved, and this one is reserved. So out of, you've got 3 sections here and this. So out of all of the requirements in 20.3, we're only focused on visual inspections and electrical testing. So we're going to visually inspect the grounding and bonding, and then we're going to do any of our electrical testing from a periodic maintenance perspective. So cleaning, there's no lubrication, but we put it reserved because this is sort of the structure of each of the chapters. We wanted to maintain a structure. I would argue there's probably an opportunity for mechanical servicing. Torque might be one of those. That would be mechanical servicing. All right, let's take a look. You know, it's what's interesting is as I look through, it's not. I was just with an individual this past week. It creates educational materials, does and teaches, okay, a curriculum, etc. And we were looking at the National Electrical Code and changes that may need to occur. And he made a point. It's when you start to actually try to teach this that you recognize, I think this needs to change. And these are the things that are going through my mind right now. But and if you're familiar with 70B, this is your opportunity as you implement 70B. This is an opportunity to determine public inputs for next cycle. So the scope, let's talk about the scope. Maintenance requirements for the grounding and bonding of electrical systems. That's pretty straightforward. Frequency of maintenance is basically pointing you to 2 locations, 20.3, which we said what 20.3 was earlier, and chapter 9. So points you back to chapter 9. So that's a specific pointer. These are general. Chapter 9 is your frequency of maintenance, and it applies to all the electrical equipment. So what we'll have to do is go back to chapter 9 and understand the requirements there, and understand that you can have a continuous monitoring and predictive technique with regard to your equipment grounding solutions as well, right? So if you have something that's monitoring the grounds, say a continuous monitoring or of an insured equipment grounding program or grounding program, you can have this monitoring system give you information to help you understand when the condition of your grounding and bonding system changes over time. I'm sure there are products on the market that can help you do that. I don't know what those may be. You might know. If you know, put them in the chat. Are there predictive techniques and continuous monitoring solutions for the grounding and bonding system? This is your opportunity to share your knowledge. And that's what the IAEI is all about. And that's what this channel is all about. It's not a one-way street. Use the chat, please. I know this is a recorded session, but your chat information will live on. And if you have questions, please chat them up. We'll address those later. Maintenance frequency modifications. This says that you can, so this is interesting. So 9.1.1 tells us, look, you can have continuous monitoring and predictive techniques, and you may modify your schedule of maintenance based upon this information. 9.1.2 tells us that, look, you're going to establish the frequency for maintenance of your equipment. So you're going to take a look at your grounding and bonding. You're going to establish the frequency of maintenance for grounding and bonding in your power distribution system. Then you're going to adhere to that for 2 maintenance cycles. You adhere to your initial frequency for at least 2 maintenance cycles. And I believe then after which you can modify. So that's an interesting part of the puzzle. Go take a look at 9.1.2. Read through that language and let me know if you think it needs some clarity. Now, 9.2 is where the meat of the frequency of maintenance is going to come from. Remember, the first thing we do is we tell you, go back to the manufacturer and look at their recommendations. And if they're not provided, then you can use the table 9.2.2 to establish those conditions of maintenance. Now, if I think about grounding and bonding, or I went through table 9.2.2, and I grabbed grounding and bonding from that table. There's a row in there. Thermography is up above. That applies generally. So it tells us that we should do thermography every 12 months for condition 1, and condition 2 is 12 months, and condition 3 is 6 months. I'll try to help you understand the conditions 1, 2, and 3 as well. We have visual inspections. Remember, we had visual and electrical testing. We didn't have cleaning. We didn't have anything for lubrication. We didn't have anything for mechanical servicing. So, visual is 12, 12, and 6. And electrical testing is every 60 months. That's 5 years. 36 months, 3 years. And then 36 months for condition 3. I'm surprised condition 3 is the same as condition 2. Because as you move to the right, condition 1, 2, and 3, 1's like, new equipment. 2 is, it's been beat up a little bit. Condition 3 is, hey, we've got some issues. So electrical testing, still every 36 months, every 3 years on that one. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a quick check of that. I'm going to go chapter 9. I'm going to go to 9.2. I'm going to go to that table. I'm going to look at grounding and bonding, expand. And I'm going to come down to grounding and bonding. It's in alphabetical order. And it is 60, 36, 36. So I just verified that my slide is accurate. Didn't look right, but it's accurate. Now, your conditions, you have to go to chapter, or you're still in 9. You go to 9.3 to establish the condition of maintenance. You have a physical condition, you have a criticality condition, and you have an operating environment condition. The criticality condition, what we had to remove out of there, and it's going to need some work. But what used to be in there was the relationship with the business. Like, if I lose this piece of equipment, it can shut down and cost me billions of dollars an hour. I don't know. We couldn't come up with language to quantify that. So 932, I think, is going to need a little bit of attention in the next cycle. Take a look at 932 on NFPA link and let me know your thoughts on that one. So again, these are your 20.3. You have your visual inspection and you have your electrical testing. The rest are reserved. And we know the frequency. And again, you're going to look at the equipment. So now grounding and bonding. So think about a panel board. If you have a panel board, you're going to want to look at the manufacturer's instructions for that panel board to see what grounding and bonding recommendations for maintenance are. And that's going to be your go-to. If they don't have anything, then you have this. So grounding and bonding, and that's any piece of equipment. Panel board, switchboard, switchgear, switches, industrial control panels, electric machinery, anything that's connected to the power distribution system that has instructions and maintenance. Take a look in each of those components for any guidance on grounding and bonding. That's the challenge with this topic, is we bond and we, so for example, you may have one manufacturer may have a panel board that tells you you need to scrape paint off of the enclosure because maybe they powder coated it when you establish your ground. It could be that your photovoltaic system, grounding and bonding, has something similar. They may tell you exactly what equipment or what bolts and screws and et cetera can be used or should be used to establish the bonding in that equipment and where the bonding has to occur. So grounding and bonding is one of these discussions that goes across all of the different pieces of equipment. So you've got to be very diligent in the details of how you bond to equipment. If, for example, you have a powder coated piece of equipment, they may tell you scrape off the powder coating to get the bare metal and then secure. They may tell you that if this is aluminum, that you can't use a copper termination. You have to use something that's listed for aluminum equipment to create that bond. So terminations are very critical and important. And going to chapter 20, looking at visual inspections and electrical testing, those the establishing that ground is probably, and more than likely, and I could argue, and I love to argue, I would argue that the NEC establishes what and how to bond that equipment, right? So terminations, all of those things on what are the components I'm permitted to use, how do I need to establish that bond on equipment is a National Electrical Code installation requirement. Hence, you see the dovetail of these documents. So I'm not going to tell you in NFPA 70B, or NFPA 70B is not going to tell you how to make that termination. NFPA 70B is going to tell you you better have followed the National Electrical Code and manufacturer's instructions when you installed the equipment to ground and bond it. But 70B is not going to tell you that. 70B is going to tell you how to inspect after the fact. Do you see the relationship here? So we're going to look at visual inspections and we're going to look at electrical testing. But be mindful, again, that initial installation, follow the right requirements and follow manufacturer's instructions. All right, so visual inspections, offline standard tests. What does that mean? Offline is establish an electrically safe work condition and perform these tests. You don't want to do these while they're energized. You're going to look at the physical condition of the accessible and visible components and connections. You're going to inspect the mechanical condition of the accessible and visible components and connections, and you're going to inspect any anchorage. So these are offline. You're going to be inside that equipment. You're going to have to establish an electrically safe work condition following what? NFPA 70E. Okay, so again, you see the dovetail of these documents and how they're going to relate to each other. So you're going to look at the door, and they said accessible and visible. What you don't want to do, if you have a ground or whatever that's not accessible and not visible, that means you would probably need to be disconnecting a lot of pieces and parts to get to see and do this inspection, you don't want to do that. You do not want to start taking and disassembling the equipment just to get to a termination that may not be visible. You just don't want to do that. There are other ways to test those components, and that's going to be done in the electrical testing. So you're going to want to do your visual inspections, looking at things that are visible and accessible, making sure that your terminations are looking good. You can look for discolorations and things of that nature, but you're going to do that visual inspection. And again, your type 1, type 2, type 1A, and type 2A, that's going to be defined in Chapter 8 in Section 8.3, which we already talked about. That's going to tell you what we mean by an online standard test and an online enhanced test. And remember, your enhanced tests are going to be when you do I don't know, maybe you did thermography, and maybe a termination did not look quite well. It's on that borderline. It's not quite what you're typical in seeing in this equipment. It's not something you've ever seen before. You've done your homework. It's questionable. You may elect to do the enhanced test. Okay? Enhanced test is not quote unquote optional. It's when you get that indication that something is on the edge, something doesn't quite look right, you're going to do that enhanced test. That's described in Chapter 8, Section 8.3. Read through that if you want to understand more fully enhanced versus standard, online, offline, etc., etc. All right, 20.3.5, the electrical testing. Now, you're going to have offline and online, I believe. This is offline enhanced tests, your connections. Measure bolted mechanical connection resistance. Remember, you're going to do thermography. That's a baseline. You're going to be looking for, thermography is going to help you determine whether or not there's current flowing through that termination, etc. Your visual inspections are going to help you look at the overall condition of that. You have your you want to measure your bolted or mechanical connection resistance. So if you see something again that is questionable, you can do an offline enhanced test. Your ground rod electrode system, fall of potential test measuring ground rod to earth resistance. You're going to do a bonding test, point to point, verifying equipment bonding, and substation, or your substation in current, injecting current in, you're injecting current to test the substation grounding and bonding. So there are tests that can be performed. These are not standard tests. These are enhanced, which means you're questioning something, the integrity of something. It could be that the system saw a ground fault, and you know there were mechanical stresses placed on every component. You may elect, based upon that experience, you may elect to do these tests. They're not standard tests. This would be offline enhanced tests. And again, that is a Chapter 8, 8.3. Now, these are, again, online enhanced tests. Measure the voltage between the equipment grounding conductor, measure the current magnitude on the equipment grounding conductor. When an enhanced test is not a standard test, not something you do on every single grounding and bonding termination. You do this when you suspect something. And when I say you suspect something, you had a fault on the system. You have something going on in your system that you think might be related to grounding and bonding, which for obvious reasons, people think everything is related to grounding and bonding. It's that mystery, right? So again, these are online enhanced tests. Chapter 8, 8.3. So those were the tests. That is basically all that we see in chapter 20 for grounding and bonding. It's a relatively short I want to call it an article, chapter within 70B. There's no cleaning, no lubrication, no mechanical servicing, but that's basically how you're navigating this document, right? So it's a relatively short. If you're of the opinion, Tom, there were no standard tests on the electrical side, there were no mechanical tests, and you have an idea on what you think should be there from an electrical perspective or a mechanical perspective, or if you think that the visual tests are kind of vague, I look forward to your public input for the next cycle. Remember, this was the first round. If in your opinion you think the grounding and bonding maintenance in 70B needs a little love, I can help you. Anybody on 70B can help you. We can talk about it. Now's the time. So take a look, use the chat it up on maintenance for grounding and bonding. The importance of grounding and bonding is there, right? You need that to operate that overcurrent protective device. You want a low impedance path. You want to make sure that there are no multiple bonding of your neutral and your equipment grounding in a grounded system. So where those are National Electrical Code requirements. Understand, and when you're thinking about what you think might be missing here, you have to understand how these documents work together. The National Electrical Code is your installation requirement. That's where you're going to find how you establish the bond, the right terminations, the right equipment to establish that bonding of the power system, how you establish the earthing, the ground in the power distribution system, the practices of not having multiple grounds in a power distribution system. You want to bond everything, bring it all back to one location. That's an installation requirement. That's not a maintenance requirement. Should you look for that? Probably. Should there be something in here that's a little bit more prescriptive in regard to your visual inspections, making sure you don't have multiple grounds in a power distribution system? Make sure you're not connecting the grounded conductor with the grounding conductor throughout the power system. Maybe, but that would mean you didn't follow the installation requirements, because the installation requirements is what helps us make sure that we don't do those things. Now, let's take a look at panel boards. We talked panel boards before, right? Let's take a look at the visual inspection of a panel board. I'm going to just open up the table here. It says physical condition, anchorage and grounding. Ooh, grounding is in panel boards too. So you're going to be looking at it there as well. Verify circuit breaker fuses, etc. Verify instrument transformer ratios. Verify insulators. Verify filters are clean. Ensure maintenance devices. Verify phase barriers are in place. Visually inspect environmental controls. For individual components, refer to the appropriate chapter. So if I have a breaker in there, etc. There's nothing in the visual inspections for a panel board to say make sure it was installed correctly. Why? Because we do that up front. Those are a general requirement. Let's take a look at your general requirements. Chapter 4, electrical equipment shall be maintained. Standards not intended to duplicate. The absence of manufacturer's instructions. Then you have your maintenance program. You have inspection. The MP shall include elements to verify that the electrical equipment or systems have been inspected to comply with applicable installation codes and standards. That's in 4.2. Point 2. So grounding and bonding, if you want to know, did they install it correctly? Did I introduce something that violated the NEC? You do have to do it for grounding and bonding, even though it's not in Chapter 20. It's in 4.2.2.1. The electrical maintenance program shall include elements to verify that electrical equipment or systems have been inspected to comply with applicable installation codes and standards. Equipment-specific manufacturer maintenance tasks shall be developed utilizing the information gathered during the inspection. So you have to make sure that it was installed correctly. So whether or not you're using the right terminations, all of the information around grounding and bonding that's in the National Electrical Code, you're going to have to look at. Just because it's not in Chapter 20 doesn't mean you don't have to do it. It just means that making sure that you have the right, for example, another good example, if in the installation it says that the equipment grounding conductor has to be insulated, that's not a Chapter 20 deal. That's an NEC deal. That's a Chapter 4 requirement. If you're looking at an installation in an area where the installation code requires the insulated equipment grounding conductor, you're not going to find that in Chapter 20. You're going to find that in the installation requirements. Here in 4.2.2.1, you need to make sure that it was installed per the National Electrical Code. If you have a requirement where the terminations must be compatible, and you have to make sure that you have an aluminum frame and you need to bond to it, that you use the right bonding method. It's not a 70B, it's a 70 National Electrical Code. That should have been taken care of appropriately during the installation requirements. You see how they dovetail. It's a trilogy. I call it the trilogy: 70, 70E, and 70B. And now 70B is a maintenance, or it is a standard, and it's a required document. Hopefully, that helps you understand not only grounding and bonding maintenance, but also how this document is put together. And it helps you understand the critical nature of maintenance in a power distribution system. Hopefully you were chatting it up. I appreciate you taking the time today to take this journey through 70B as it pertains to grounding and bonding here on IAEI News Live. Thanks for what you do for the electrical industry. Thanks for what you do for electrical safety. Remember to stay safe, and please stay healthy. I will see you next week. Subscribe, thumbs up, hit that bell, and you'll be notified when we post. Take care. See ya.